how you doing today? My name's Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and on today's video we're discussing good series gone bad and bad series gone good. I am disclaiming this from the very beginning that just because I'm saying these are good series gone bad does not mean that the series is bad. It doesn't mean that they are bad. They're mostly series that I progressively enjoyed less and less, or I felt had a really strong start and maybe couldn't continue that momentum. And with the bad books gone good, again, it doesn't mean that they were bad. For most of them, it just means that maybe the first book wasn't my favourite and I felt the series got better as it progressed. So, you know, I don't actually mean bad, I just mean, you know. So, I'm gonna start with the series that started off really good and that I was really enjoying and have either now DNF'd or I just felt got like the rest of the series wasn't as good as it started. And I'm actually starting this with one of my favourite authors of all time. This author is in my top 5, and that is Christina Henry with the Alice series. Alice, 5-star, one of the best books I've ever read. I still maintain to this day that it is an incredible book and I absolutely love it. Red Queen, on the other hand, I gave 2 stars and I felt it completely lost everything that made Alice so good. I wasn't interested. I hated the fact that it kind of separated the 2 main characters for the majority of the book. I felt Alice's monologue and internal conflict was just not very good. And yeah, I just did not enjoy the second book. She then released a 3rd book that was kind of 4 short stories set. A couple of them were like precursors and the others were set after the duology. And it was okay. It didn't need to be written, but I enjoyed what I read. So this is definitely one. The first book was incredible. The second book wasn't it for me personally. Then we have the Geekerella series by Ashley Poston. Again, this one started so good. It was 5 stars. I had the best time. The second book, it was enjoyable. The third book, the secondary plot and storyline where we had Darian and Elle from the first book, they were kind of sidelined, but their storyline and what was happening with them was way more interesting than the one that we got. And I just felt like a lot of their development and a lot of their characters were spoiled. And I just had no interest in the final book. And yeah, it wasn't it. And I just felt that each of those books just got progressively less and less magical and special, and the stuff that made the first book so good was all but gone by the final book. I have a few that are probably going to garner a bit of hate, but the next one is one of them, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Do not get me wrong, I still love this series. It's on my reread list for this year. I am specifically talking the Six of Crows duology here, not the King of Scars, not the Shadow and Bone series, just these 2 books. Six of Crows was the far superior book, in my opinion. It just had that perfect blend of bringing us all of the characters, the heist, the getting to see what these guys were like as a group, learning their dynamics, unfolding the relationships. I felt it was absolutely perfect. I definitely enjoyed Crooked Kingdom. I gave Crooked Kingdom 4 stars, but the 5-star absolute almost perfection was absolutely Six of Crows for me. And I just felt that Crooked Kingdom just wasn't as good as that first book, and this one is just one that I think about very often. Next up we have Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Again, one that had such a fantastic promise. I really loved the atmosphere and the writing of Caraval and the idea of it. But again, by book 2, where it switched POVs to Scarlett's sister, who I can't even remember her name, Donatella, something like that. Absolutely hated her. I did not enjoy her. I didn't like the romance in there. I definitely felt that it started to improve when Jax came into it, but even then, and a lot of the atmosphere kind of disappeared for me. And then by the third book, when they started to introduce other elements to do with Scarlet in particular, there was just so much wasted potential there, and I kind of felt like what could have been an incredible story fizzled out. By the third one, I was like, is this even the same series anymore? Then we have a manga. I've not really got a lot of manga for this one, but I did want to point this one out for me personally, and that is Cat Plus Gamer. I started off 5-starring the first one, but then it's kind of gone 5, 4, 3. And this is just because nothing's happening in these books. It didn't need a super big plot, but it needed more, especially 3 volumes in, and it's still very much the same as the first book. I was just getting bored. It didn't have enough substance to maintain my interest, even though it's a book about kittens and cats. You would think that that would keep me hooked. And the fact that I am a gamer, you would think that I would have been completely obsessed with this series. But like I said, by the end of the 3rd volume, I was bored and I have no interest now in continuing it. And it's a real shame because, again, one that had so much potential for me, and I 5-starred the first volume, but now I don't want to continue. Next up, we had Stalking Jack the Ripper. I enjoyed Stalking Jack the Ripper again, was one I gave 5 stars. The atmosphere, the writing, the way that real-life historical events were weaved into it, fantastically done. The chemistry between Audrey Rose and Thomas was just, you know, it was fantastic. And then Hunting Prince Dracula, it lost a lot. There was still some good moments, and that by the end I was still like, ooh, I want to read the next book. But I think Kerry Maniscalco is just very good at ending things on a bit of a cliffhanger to hook you in. I have not finished this series. I don't plan on finishing this series. I've heard things about the 3rd book being that that's by far the most sort of drab, drear, boring one, and it's also set on a ship and it's all about moving on a boat and traveling. Those are all things that I hate to read and I don't enjoy. As you saw on my buzzword bingo recently, travel is not something that interests me. So a book where they are set on a ship traveling and the whole story takes place there, nah, I'm done. I'm good. I'll just put that first book as being incredible and I will move on with my life. And then the final one that I'm going to talk about here is the last one, and is the one that I think will garner the most hate. But at this point, if you've been on my channel for longer than 5 seconds, you knew it was coming, and that is Crescent City by Sarah J Maas. I still stand by this book, the first one, 5 stars, Book of the Year 2021, destroyed me both times. It was my first and my last read of the year. Book 2, absolute trash. I hated it. There was only one character I gave any kind of crap about by the end. I feel like what drove me with the first book was the emotional pull and the relationship of Danica and Bryce and their friendship and the history and the emotional turmoil that Bryce was going through. Once that was resolved, the series just went boring and I didn't give a damn about anyone and I couldn't care, and the world building wasn't good enough for me to justify that tonal shift. Because now that it wasn't about the emotional murder mystery whodunit aspect, all the other stuff that came into the second book, it kind of felt like it needed more built into the first book for it to have had as big an impact. And I've again heard very mixed things about the 3rd book, but everyone I know who has read it, even people who are hardcore SJM stans, have said that the 3rd book is not her best work and felt rushed and wasn't very well written. So I am glad that I did give up this series because, you know, I'm not going to force myself to read something when the first book was so good and every book since has just not been. But that is a theme I've found. This is the 2nd series I've read of hers, and I had the same issue with Throne of Glass. First book, absolutely incredible, and then every book after that, by the time I got to book 4, I was bored, I didn't care about any of the characters, and I felt like the main character went backwards in her development and became a bit pathetic, and yeah, I gave up. So I think me and SJM are just done in general. Now on to the series that I felt started bad and then went good, or started mediocre, shall we say. And the first of those is the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. This one started off kind of, I didn't particularly like any of the characters. Mac was a wet snot rag, did not like her or her attitude, and the relationship between her and Barons was toxic AF. However, by the end of this series, by the end of the original quadrilogy, I was obsessed with everyone. The lore and the world building was great. This is one that made me start wondering if me tripping over fresh air as often as I do was in fact actually something else, and made me start to think about what it would be like. And it really did make me feel like if this was real and that actually happened, that would terrify me. And it was the first time that a book had really made me think, what if that did happen? Even though it's completely fantasy and it's not real, it did make me wonder, what if it could be real? And that was a really trippy, weird experience. But by the end of it, I loved everybody, and it was so, so good. And every book just increased the drama, and I loved it. Then we have the Shadow of the Fox series by Julie Kagawa. The first book was by no means mediocre. It was good. I gave it 4 stars or 4.5 stars. It was just a bit slower for the build-up, and it wasn't until the second book that action really kicked in and the stakes went higher. And then by the third book, I've said it before, Julie Kagawa is not afraid to tear your heart out. You think someone's safe and then bam, they're not, and you're like, what? So, you know, I just felt every single book got more and more and more ramped up, more and more and more intense. And by the time I started the third book, I was like, I'm genuinely scared to get into this. But the first book, I will say, was a bit slower, a little bit more of that kind of what you would expect from a YA series. And I can see why a lot of people either found it bland or didn't really enjoy it as much. But by the end of the series, incredible. Another one that, again, starts off slow, and I felt that every book since has just ramped up and up and up and up, and I'm like, where is this going to hit the ceiling? Like, when is the ceiling going to hit? And that is the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. Now, I've often said to people when I'm recommending this series, I don't like it when people say, oh, it takes 2 or 3 books for it to get good. I tell people that book 2 is where it really gets good. Treat book 1 as a prequel. Treat book 1 almost as like a, this is the world, this is where we're at, these are all the characters, here's what's going on politically. The first book is very slow. It's very much sort of showing us who Oren is at that moment in time and the ways that Midas has been manipulating her. Book 2, when she falls into the hands of Commander Rip, and then that storyline kicks in and we get way more in terms of action, romance, adventure, and Oren herself realizing her true power and the person she can be without that control of Midas. That is when this series absolutely hooked me. I gave book 1 3 stars, almost 2.5. Book 2, I gave 4.5 stars, and it's been 5 stars for book 3 and 4. Haven't yet read book 5 because I'm waiting for book 6 to come out later this year so I can back-to-back them. Book 4 was book of the year for 2022, and I am very excited, and each book has been getting better and better and better. Just so, so good. And then the final one that we're going to talk about for this video is The Raven Cycle. As you well know by now, I DNF'd this originally. I started reading it in 2022. I thought, it's not for me. The writing's a bit weird. I'm not really getting anything out of this. I'm not really liking the characters. It's not hooking me in. Then Ren came along in 2023 and picked this out as a one that they said I had to read. I was like, fine, I will do it. And I decided, in the past, when I've struggled to physically read a book, I've switched to audio, and that has worked really well. And that's what I did. I switched to the audio, and holy crap, Will Patton's narration, hook, line, sinker, sucked me in, built that atmosphere beautifully. His voice drew out the dark, spooky atmosphere, mysterious, not quite sure what's going on. With his voice just matches that so perfectly. But even so, the first book, I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. The second book, whoops, wasn't my favourite. It did almost lose me again, but that was more, I really hated Kavinsky, whatever his name is. Really hated that. Didn't enjoy that at all. But the characters and the atmosphere in this ramped up, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting hooked on that. But then Blue Lily, Lily Blue came along, destroyed me, heart, mind and soul, and that was it. I was obsessed from that point on, and then I really loved the fourth book, and now I'm reading the sequel series and so far having the best time. So again, it was just one that I felt the first book started off a bit, not really sure, and as I said, I DNF'd it, but once I switched to the audiobooks, flew through all of them. It's now one of my all-time favourite series, and I've raved about it multiple times since, and I'll probably never stop raving about it, if I'm honest. So you have it, those are a bunch of series that I felt were good and then went bad, and some that were bad and then went good. Let me know in the comments if you have any series that fall on that side, and let me know what your thoughts are on any of these. In the meantime, I hope you're all good, I hope you're staying safe. Don't forget to check out my Etsy and Patreon, both are linked below, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!